Let's start with a very interesting story from Writes for Doe 42. No one can fire my boss. So she does it herself. This isn't my story, but I was able to witness it in all its glory because I used to work for one of the people involved. Years ago, I used to work at a state government agency where my boss was a political appointee. Her mom was a bigwig in our governor's party who wrangled a political appointment for her daughter, which meant she had some clout behind her. Let's call her Shannon. Shannon was not good at her job, at all. She was frequently out of the office for meetings, e.g., 2-hour lunches, coffee with friends, a bit of shopping. She was also a bully and a tyrant. She bullied her staff and would hold the threat of firing over everyone's heads to get them to do what she wanted. She wasn't a micromanager because she was never around enough to actually micromanage anything, and she was widely disliked throughout the entire building. This was a large agency, so to have a building where almost everyone disliked you took a lot of work. The problem is that as a political appointee, she was untouchable. The people who had the power to fire her couldn't because of her family. Even the number 3 person in the agency couldn't do it, and he was a political appointee as well. But after a year of mystery meetings and time out of the office, her excuses were catching up to her. The agency director removed her from her job and put her in charge of special projects. Anyone who's worked in a corporate job knows that people get put in charge of special projects because they were largely incapable of doing their previous job. They didn't get fired, but they no longer had any power. This was Shannon's case. For a while, she seemed to get the message. She shaped up, didn't have any more mystery meetings, didn't disappear from the building for 2 hours, and treated people somewhat nicely. Of course, it didn't last, and Shannon returned to her old ways. Around that time, we got a new assistant director. We'll call her Tricia, who was also a political appointee. She was the number 2 person in the whole agency, and she was great to work for. She was very serious about her job. She had access to Shannon's electronic calendar and saw what Shannon had been up to. She then cross-checked the security logs to see when Shannon was in and out of the building. After her brief investigation, Tricia emailed Shannon with a list of dates and said, "Can you tell me more about these different meetings you were having? And why they took so long?" I'm paraphrasing. Well, Shannon wasn't having any of that. How dare Tricia call her character into question? This was an outrage. It was so outrageous, in fact, that Shannon wrote a resignation letter and slammed it down on Tricia's desk. That'll show her. After a few hours, Shannon had time to think about what she had done. She remembered that she had a 1-year-old at home. She also remembered that her husband was an unskilled truck driver who made $8 an hour. Edit. He was a local delivery driver for a construction firm, not a CDL driver. And she remembered that she was the primary breadwinner for her family. She went back, hat in hand, and apologized for her attitude. She said she was willing to try harder, and she asked Tricia if she could please possibly have her letter back. Pretty please? Tricia said, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're too late. I already processed the letter and sent it off to HR. I'm afraid I can't undo that." Do you remember in the movie, The Incredible, when Mr. Incredible fought the giant ball with legs? The ball was so indestructible and powerful, the only thing that could beat it was itself? This was that moment. The previously untouchable political appointee had just been fired by the only political appointee who had that power, herself. And rather than protect her or do her a solid, Tricia would not undo her self-termination. She just let Shannon be her own undoing. When news of Shannon's self-firing raced through the building, you could hear the cries of, "What? Are you serious?" followed by howls of laughter as each new person heard the story. Shannon was out, and everyone who had to deal with her was much happier than they had ever been in that job. Edit. Thank you to everyone for the great comments and the awards. That's very cool, and I really appreciate it. You all are awesome. This malicious compliance was brilliantly executed. Shannon's own impulsive resignation became her undoing, perfectly orchestrated by Tricia's refusal to reverse it. It's a masterclass in letting someone self-destruct through their own arrogance and poor judgment, delivering justice flawlessly. The next story from Alone in Dankness. She not only lost her job, the whole store was shut down. Just to preface, this malicious compliance didn't lose her the store, but it didn't help either. A few years ago, I worked for my college bookstore. It was great at first, but then Idiot started working there. Idiot was not prepared to manage the store. She hired 5 people to stock, cashier, work the floor, etc., instead of 2. She blew through her entire payroll budget in less than 6 months. Someone came from the main office to help her learn the ropes, and she learned nothing. She even had me do her daily reports, that I shouldn't have been allowed to do it at all, and she never learned how to do them. She was super lazy and just bad at her job. The reason she blew through her payroll budget is that she didn't want to be on the floor at all. Anyway, I asked her in March if I would be working or not, so I would have time to look for summer work, and she told me that I would be working all summer. I had just moved out of my parents' house, so I really needed the money. May rolls around and she tells me she can't have me for a single day. I was mad and panicky, but I figured it out and moved out just fine. In August, I come back with a sprained toe. It was really visibly bad. My toe was entirely bruised. I asked her if I could work on the daily reports, which involved sitting. She said that she needed me up front, on the register. I asked if I could sit on a stool, as standing hurt. She said that was unprofessional and that I had to stand. Just a little note here. I didn't get sick pay at this job, but if someone called in sick, the company policy was to let them go for 1 day without questions. After that, you could start to ask what was up, maybe request a doctor's note. MC number 1, I faked a cough and said, "I'm sorry, idiot. I'm too sick to work. I think I'm going to go home." She immediately started to backtrack, and she said I could sit on the stool if I needed to, but I decided it hurt too much to work. I had thrown the real rules in her face. There was no rule against sitting at the register, and she had to let me go home. She was stuck on the floor all day. The next day I worked, I looked at the schedule, and I had no shifts beyond that day. She had even taken my name off the schedule. It was frustrating and petty as hell. I found out later that she thought I talked too much. I was a goddamn cashier. It's my job to talk to people. It didn't get to me for long, though, since I was already done with the BS of the job. I was back in school, so I didn't really need the money, student loans, and I was starting my thesis. I decided enough was enough. MC number 2. Toward the end of my shift, I requested a meeting with Idiot and the assistant manager, AM, who had been telling me I should escape ASAP. AM was cool. Idiot told me that she couldn't have me working often, but that I could come in once a month to do the daily reports. You know. I told Idiot that I was giving my 2 weeks' notice, as I had school work to do. It was pretty clear she wanted me gone, so she wholeheartedly agreed. As I got up to leave, she started to ask me when I could teach her how to do the daily reports. I told her that I was sorry, but I was not scheduled to work the next 2 weeks. In fact, I wasn't scheduled at all. You are not allowed to change an employee's schedule after they give their 2 weeks. Her face blanched, and she realized she had screwed herself. I could report her to upper management for all the BS she was pulling. More than mentioned here. She was stuck. I walked out of there feeling free. Later, I found out from AM that the store had gone to shit without me. Apparently, Idiot wasn't really friendly, nor was she good at customer service. People used to come in the store specifically to talk to me, and then they would buy something for wasting my time. Sales went down. She started letting people go, and sales kept going down. She didn't do the daily reports for so long that someone from corporate had to come and do them for her. I found out in January, 5 months later, that the corporate office decided to close the location. She was out of a job, and they weren't looking to hire her back into the company. I don't know what happened to Idiot after that. TL, DR. Idiot boss takes over, makes a bunch of mistakes, and I help cover her ass. She repays me by trying to force me to work through an injury. I throw the rules in her face, and she stops giving me shifts. I decide that if she doesn't want me to work there, I should move on. She screws herself over so hard, the store gets closed, and she loses her job. Edit. The policy against changing someone's schedule from their 2 weeks' notice was a company policy. IDK why they had it, but it was helpful to me. The next story from Jorgel. The principal of the school asked everyone to be 30 minutes early for the exam. 30 or so hours of overtime were paid, and she had to monitor students herself. I'm not a native English speaker. I apologize if I make mistakes. I'm a teacher. The principal we had at our school was the kind who got to this position because it was a way to escape teaching students. She was a teacher before taking the exam to be principal, which is common, and to flaunt the little authority it got her. One of the issues I had with her was about punctuality. She was especially a hard ass about it, which would have been fine if she weren't herself systematically late to everything. I loathe hypocrites, and it makes our job especially difficult to ask students to be on time at classes when the principal was half an hour late at a meeting she scheduled herself with their parents. Come the end of year, and with it, time for the baccalaureate, final exam of high school. The students start to receive their convocations for the exam week. When we see their convocations, we're already pissed because the time is wrong, on purpose. It would tell a student they have to be there at 7:30 for a 4-hour test, without even telling them the test is actually scheduled to start at 8 and ends at 12. A few days later, the teachers received their own convocations to monitor the tests. It's usual to get them after the students, though it was particularly late this year. For us, the scheduled time of the test is correct, but it was mentioned on each of our convocations that we had to be present 30 minutes before the start of each test. I mean, we aren't going to be present at 8 o'clock exactly if the test is scheduled to start at that time. We don't want to screw the students over. We need a few minutes to get the test papers and let the students in the classroom so that we can start exactly on time. But 5 minutes is enough, 10 at most, and as teachers, we are used to being there slightly before class starts anyway. Most of us simply ignored her and came to the exam on time as usual, but dozens of us decided to comply, and we sent her emails tallying up the total number of hours we'd be working that week, adding that half hour before each test. She answered some bullshit that our tallies were wrong because she wasn't counting the half hour. We let that pass, we complied, and my colleagues declared their overtime. In the end, that came to about 30 hours of overtime total for doing jack shit that had to be paid. She also did not seem to realize that my email was slightly different than that of my colleagues. Me, that's a bit different, because I work part-time. As such, I'm not allowed to do overtime. The reason for that is because both part-time and overtime are paid more than regular hours, so it has to be either or. Comes Friday. I sent a new email reminding her about the upcoming issue. No answers. The last 4-hour test of the week starts at 1300 hours. At 14:25, I ask my colleague monitoring the next room over, who was in on the plan, to cover for me for 5 minutes. There's a door between the exam rooms. We can stand there and watch both rooms to let the other take a bathroom break or something like that. I go to the principal's office. I remind her that there is a room full of students with 2 hours 30 minutes left, and I don't know if she's scheduled someone to take over for me, but I've already done all my hours for this week, and since I'm not allowed to do overtime, I'm leaving. Now, as a teacher, I take pride in my punctuality and my ability to finish my speech exactly on time. I also purposefully timed this one. Just after I told her I was leaving, I look at my watch. It's 3 seconds to 14:30. I look at her face while she gathers her thoughts. In 3 seconds, she went from confusion to realization to anger, and just as she's about to answer, it's time. So I turn around and walk away. "What are you doing? Stay here. We're not finished." I answer without looking back. "Sorry, it's 14:30. My work is done. I'm not being paid to listen to you." I leave while I hear her half-coherent threats. She followed me, of course, but couldn't really talk loudly in the corridors while the exam was taking place. Plus, she still knows that loudly berating a teacher in public in full view and hearing of students would be extremely unprofessional, and she's the one who'd get in trouble for that. More importantly, I know where I'm going. I pass in front of the classroom I was monitoring in earlier. I thank my colleague, points at the principal who's just catching up, red as a beet, and tell him, "I brought you the principal." I leave as he greets her, thus intercepting her for me. I learned that she had to monitor the students herself, which must have pissed her off something fierce because she leaves early on Fridays. Next week, obviously, she requested that we had a talk in her office. I went with my union representative. We explained to her that it was not difficult to prove that she was the one in the wrong, and that if she wanted to escalate the issue, we would have no problem getting it to the administrative tribunal. My union representative also made the open threat of a strike, that I and those who declared their overtime had the support of the union and teaching staff. TLDR, principal asked all teachers, in writing, to be there 30 minutes early for exams. Most ignored it. Some did and declared it as overtime. I left early on exam day, forcing her to monitor the students herself. The malicious compliance was brilliantly executed. Precise timing, clear boundaries, and firm adherence to rules forced the principal to face the consequences of her own demands. It was a clever, satisfying stand against hypocrisy that upheld professionalism and union power flawlessly. The next story from Ania, 39 dot dot dot. I need to work slower and look busy for the boss. You got it. For background, I have always been an incredibly hard and efficient worker, always getting things done faster than expected and going above and beyond. My program for college required us to go to class for 6 months of the year and work full-time in our field for the remaining 6 months. As a freshman in college, I got my first job at an automotive supplier. My first semester was fairly slow, mainly due to the fact that the person who was supposed to train me went on medical leave my first week there and didn't come back for almost a year, and wasn't replaced. However, in my second semester, things really took a turn for the worse. Two key things happened at the start of my next semester. One, I was moved to a new department. Two, the company began merging with one of their competitors. Now, when the company began the merger, they decided they were going to move everything at my site to the other company's HQ in another nearby city. The first thing that moved was vast majority of the equipment my new department used. The upper management made the brilliant decision to leave the 4 members of my department, 1 supervisor, 1 tech, and 2 students, at the old site until the move was complete. This meant we had essentially nothing we could work on. Here's where we get into the MC. After about 2 weeks of sitting around, my supervisor, 60F, finally came up with a small task for me. I completed this in about 4 hours, which I thought was pretty good for something I had never done and had little training on, so I went to let her know. Me. Hey, Super, I'm done. Super, angry and in a panic. Done? This was supposed to take you all week. I don't have anything else for you to do now. I need you to look busy in case boss walks by. Next time I give you something to do, you need to drag it out longer so that you look busy. Now, young naive me was initially confused by getting reprimanded for working too fast, but what the boss says goes. A week or so later, I was given another task. I was to take thousands of these tiny explosive devices we use and dispose of them by detonating them in a concrete box. They were too volatile to just throw out, so they had to be discharged first. Super. And remember, take your time and don't go through them too fast. Now, this was obviously just busy work to get me out of the way, but the great thing with this task was that it had to take place in a back garage that nobody ever went in to avoid the obvious danger of people walking in while I was setting off controlled explosives. I could have easily hooked up 20 of these bad boys at a time and set them off every 5 to 10 minutes, finishing the whole batch in about a week, but I had to look busy. So instead, I set off about 5 to 10 of these once an hour and spent the rest of the time on my phone playing games, watching Netflix, listening to music, etc., while getting paid over double minimum wage at the time. I managed to stretch that project for the remaining 2.5 months. I was there, finishing just in time for the end of the semester. Anytime someone asked me for help on something else, I politely told them I would when I was done, but it might be a while because Super told me not to go through these too fast. They usually ended up finding some other bored student to help them. I think Super genuinely forgot I worked there by the end because when I stopped into her office in my last week to let her know I had finished the task, she seemed very surprised, confused, to see me. The company ended up paying me over $10,000, a lot of money for a student at the time, just to sit on my phone all day for 3 months. I sent an email to supervisor, boss, and HR at the end of the semester, letting them know that I would not be returning the next semester. In my best corporate language, I let them know I was leaving to pursue opportunities that would better utilize my time and skills. I found out later when several of us ran into each other at a job fair that all but 2 of the other students had also quit at the end of the semester out of boredom and/or uncertainty that we would even have jobs to come back to. The company did not handle the transition well and could never give us straight answers about where, when, if we would be brought back. TL, DR. Supervisor tells me to stretch out a small task so that I look busy for the boss, and they don't have to find stuff for me to do. Company ends up paying me to sit on my phone for 3 months. I and most of the other interns end up quitting due to a mismanaged merger. This malicious compliance was brilliantly executed, turning pointless busy work into paid downtime with zero risk. It perfectly highlights workplace absurdity, using slow, deliberate action to expose management's inefficiency while benefiting the worker. A clever, satisfying example of silent rebellion done right.